Chin Mu becomes slightly excited when he sees the possibility that the ship came from Carefree Village. The village chief and the others had previously discovered an incomparably enormous ship. But because it had been destroyed, they were unable to use it to travel to Carefree Village. If this ship also came from there, Chin Mu might finally have a way to return to his hometown. The two white bats, Fu Yuchen and Fu Yuchu, silently lead him through Ghost Valley. Their movements are strange and difficult to follow, as they constantly fly away without making a sound, sometimes hanging upside down from trees or cliffs before silently moving again. Ghost Valley is filled with peculiar lifeforms whose attacks are extremely strange. But the two bats are its guardians and know every part of the area. With them leading the way, Chin Mu encounters almost no danger. The two brothers occasionally capture strange creatures to eat, and they are especially delighted when they discover a boar turtle. They fly over a lake, dive into the water, and drag out the enormous creature. The boar turtle is a hexagonal insect like behemoth covered in regular hexagonal markings. With two huge and powerful pincers at its front, several enormous white eggs, each about the size of a human, are attached to its back, and some of them have already opened as if their shells had been neatly opened from the outside. The boar turtle possesses astonishing strength. It struggles violently against the two bats, its pincers producing thunderous explosions and compressed air that generates lightning around its body. It also sprays a terrifying poisonous liquid that melts everything it touches, including soil and rocks. Chin Mu is shocked by its power and realizes that its abilities are not inferior to the Dragon Qilin. Although the Dragon Qilin is extremely strong, with cultivation between the Seven Stars realm and Celestial Being realm, even a celestial being would likely be unable to withstand the boar turtle's poison. However, the two white bats are even stronger. Fu Yuchu uses sound waves from his mouth to vibrate the boar turtle until it becomes dizzy, allowing the brothers to climb onto its back and open two of its eggs. They call Chin Mu and the Dragon Qilin inside. Fu Yuchen warns that the boar turtle will soon awaken and tells them to hide inside the eggs. The boar turtle is an expert swimmer and the overlord of the water, so it can carry them from the lake into the river and toward the deep pit where its nest is located. More importantly, it is extremely protective of its children. If they hide inside the eggs, it will not attack them, and any other creature that attacks them will also be killed by the boar turtle. Chin Mu asks whether he can simply stand on its back, but Fu Yuchen explains that the boar turtle is highly alert. The Dragon Qilin then shrinks his body, claiming that because Patriarch taught him, he can change his size at will. However, even after shrinking himself to the size of a huge dog, his enormous stomach prevents him from becoming any smaller. Chin Mu chooses the largest egg, opens its shell, and tries to force the Dragon Qilin inside. Despite pushing his stomach down with all his strength, the Dragon Qilin becomes completely stuck. Chin Mu finally puts the white eggshell cover over the Dragon Qilin's head and orders him not to move. The Dragon Qilin then worries that Chin Mu might reduce his food because he is still growing. Chin Mu enters another egg himself and discovers that its interior contains something resembling egg white. The substance is extremely comfortable and gives him a sensation similar to consuming spirit pills and miraculous medicines. Fine energies enter his pores and flow into his muscles, blood vessels, meridians, 5 viscera, 6 bowels, skin, and hair, nourishing his entire body. The energy even enters his soul and strengthens it. Chin Mu is astonished and begins cultivating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. As soon as he does so, even more energy pours into his body from the egg white, causing his primordial spirit to become stronger. He realizes that the egg white is better than any spirit pill or miraculous medicine and thinks that if he could cultivate inside such an egg for a long time, his primordial spirit would become extraordinarily powerful. Looking at the other eggs, Chin Mu notices that most are already empty, meaning the young boar turtles inside them had matured and left. Only 2 or 3 eggs remain unhatched, so Chin Mu decides to steal them once they reach their destination. At that moment, the giant boar turtle awakens, moves its head, and dives into the lake. The lake is connected to a river through a tributary. The boar turtle swims into the main current and follows the river toward the place where 2 rivers converge. The river is filled with bizarre Yudu lifeforms. Chin Mu sees a long insect covered in eyes, a gigantic fish with exposed muscles instead of scales, strange insects covered in tentacles whose ends contain hooked mouths, and ghost-like beings floating through the water. He also notices many lotuses drifting on the surface. Some have withered and produced lotus seed heads from which white, chubby babies emerge. These babies appear innocent, dancing and laughing with their bare buttocks exposed. However, their true nature is terrifying. One baby suddenly opens its mouth and shoots out a 20-yard-long tongue that wraps around a strange fish. It pulls the fish into the air and swallows it instantly, leaving only its bones to sink into the riverbed. Afterward, the baby returns to dancing and laughing. Soon, a huge bird dives down, grabs the baby, raises its head, and swallows it. Qin Mu is horrified by these bizarre monsters from the world of Yudu. The borer turtle eventually reaches the deep pit mentioned by the two bats. Rather than being an ordinary pit, it is actually a massive abyss where the two rivers converge and pour downward with a continuous roar. Just before entering the abyss, the borer turtle suddenly leaps out of the water. It spreads two hard wings and two softer wings beneath them. The soft wings are sharp like razor blades and produce a humming sound as they flap. The turtle then flies directly downward into the abyss. Qin Mu and the others are thrown against the inside of the eggs, which remain attached to the turtle's hard wings. During flight, the hard wings remain still while only the soft wings beat continuously. From inside his egg, Qin Mu looks around and sees enormous mushrooms growing along the walls of the abyss. These mushrooms continuously release glowing spores that float through the darkness like dandelion seeds. Huge fish sometimes leap from the raging waterfalls to consume the spores. As soon as they swallow them, their bodies swell in midair and explode, causing huge mushrooms to grow from their bodies. The mushrooms are extremely strange because they only cause the lower half of the fish or insects to transform, while the upper half remains alive and intact. Their lower bodies become mushrooms while the creatures continue living. Long roots grow from the mushrooms and wave through the air, with some reaching the cliffs and taking root there. The fish and insects growing from the mushrooms then help hunt for food, forming a bizarre symbiotic ecosystem. The borer turtle continues descending through the abyss, guided by the faint illumination of the strange mushrooms, which are the only things preventing the abyss from becoming completely dark. After descending for countless miles, they finally reach the bottom. The area is extremely humid and filled with enormous translucent crystal pillars that sparkle with a beautiful light, illuminating the entire underground region. The borer turtle has constructed its nest on a fragment of a huge crystal pillar and lands there. At the moment it lands, Fu Yuchu once again uses his sound waves to stun it. Qin Mu has already absorbed all the energy inside his egg, leaving him refreshed and full of strength. He immediately jumps out and collects the 3 remaining unhatched eggs, placing them into his teoti sack. Meanwhile, the dragon Qilin is still stuck inside his egg and cries out for help. Qin Mu grabs both of the dragon Qilin's ears and uses all his strength to pull him out, angrily warning that if he continues becoming so fat, Qin Mu will start feeding him dirt. The dragon Qilin weakly insists that he is merely sturdy rather than fat. The 2 white bats then fly upward and explain the history of the abyss. The ship had fallen from outer space and created the enormous pit when it crashed. After reaching the underground region, it continued sliding forward for a considerable distance and eventually cracked the barrier that sealed Yudu. The ship is now directly ahead, not far away. However, most of the powerful Yudu lifeforms live around that region. By following the underground stream, Qin Mu and the bats can reach the location where the ship lies. Following their guidance, Qin Mu soon encounters corpses washed up along the shore. From their clothing and appearance, the bodies belong to powerful practitioners from Roland's Golden Palace. Their bodies have not decayed for long, indicating that they died relatively recently. Because Qin Mu has the 2 white bats guiding him, he does not encounter any danger. But if he had attempted to cross Ghost Valley and reach this place alone, the journey would have been extremely dangerous. Almost everyone who managed to reach this region was an expert, with even the weakest being at the 7 stars realm. Despite reaching such a dangerous place, these cultivators had still died before they could see the ship. Qin Mu soon discovers more skeletons from the objects left behind. He determines that they belong to disciples of the heavenly devil cult. He feels sorrow and prepares to collect several stones to bury them. But the supposed stones suddenly come alive and flee, disappearing into the river with a splash. Qin Mu and the others continue forward until they hear a deep Buddhist voice echoing through the underground space. Following the sound, they eventually arrive at its source and discover 2 elderly monks wearing yellow robes. sitting cross-legged on stone pillars. 2 shrines have been carved directly into the pillars, and the monks sit inside them with their long eyebrows hanging outside. Continuous Buddhist chanting emerges from their bodies, while Buddhist light repeatedly brightens and dims as it resists the devil chi surging through the area. Qin Mu recognizes them as monks from Great Thunderclap Monastery and is astonished to realize that they are already dead. The 2 white bats are also surprised. Fu Yuchu explains that these 2 monks had possessed extremely high cultivation and had come to this place under Rulai's orders. Their purpose was to help suppress the unusual movements of Yudu and prevent its lifeforms from escaping and harming all living beings. The bats had initially disliked their presence, but they were unable to defeat the monks, so they allowed them to stay. The monks remained there for more than 10 years and provided enormous assistance. Several times, the seal had almost been broken, but the monks helped suppress it and prevent the Yudu lifeforms from escaping. Neither bat had expected the 2 monks to eventually die from exhaustion. Fu Yuchen sighs, admitting that although they had once considered the monks food, he now has no desire to eat them. He then points out that the ship that fell from outer space is directly ahead. Qin Mu raises his head and looks forward. The sight of the mysterious ship causes his body to tremble slightly. The underground space was vast, with an enormous mountain resembling the upper body of a giant statue standing ahead. Its body was covered in pitch-black rocks, while its nose, eyes, mouth, and ears were carved in great detail. Only its upper body could be seen, meaning the lower half was either buried underground or had never been carved. Behind the statue floated an ancient ship, with half of it inside the underground space and the other half passing through a huge gate into another world. Beehive-shaped seals covered the ship, but its bow had pierced through them and entered the other world. Qin Mu realized that this must be the Yudu seal mentioned by the white bats. The ancient gods had likely once opened a passage between the real world and Yudu, allowing Yudu life forms to invade the real world, forcing the ancient gods to seal the passage. The white bat god race had then been ordered to guard the place, keeping everything peaceful until the ancient ship arrived and broke through the seals. The seals were now loosening, especially around the ship, where numerous cracks had appeared. Yudu life forms were also entering the great ruins through the ship. These strange creatures occasionally descended from the ship, flying or jumping down, but before they could travel far, the beehive seals would flash and silently sever their heads. Qin Mu observed the strange combination of the enormous god, the gate, the ship, the seals, and the Yudu creatures and felt that the underground world was extremely bizarre. The huge gate seemed familiar to him, although he could not remember where he had seen it before. He then wondered how the 2 eminent monks had died. Their abilities were far superior to those of the 2 white bats, and they had guarded this place peacefully under Rulai's orders, so their sudden deaths were suspicious. The white bats claimed that the monks had died from exhaustion, but Qin Mu felt there had to be more to it. Their physical bodies had remained strong enough to resist the devil chi of Yudu through Buddhism even after their deaths, proving that their cultivation had reached an extremely high realm. Such existences should not have died simply from exhaustion while resisting the devil chi. Qin Mu considered 2 possibilities. Terrifying life forms might have entered through the ship and killed them, or the seals might have been attacked so violently that the monks exhausted themselves while defending them. Either way, approaching the ship would certainly be dangerous. Qin Mu recalled that Yudu was Earth Count's world, where souls belonged after death. The messengers of death guided dead souls into Yudu and normally followed its rules without harming the living as long as their duties were not disturbed. Yet the Yudu life forms in Ghost Valley were completely different. They were powerful, strange, demonic, sinister, and even more evil than the heavenly devil horde he had encountered before. Compared with them, the heavenly devil horde could almost be considered kind. Qin Mu looked toward the ancient ship, which was suspended between the sky and ground by the beehive seals. Hexagonal pillars were embedded in the air layer upon layer, forming translucent, colored glass-like seals left behind by the ancient gods. However, devil chi and other strange auras continued to leak from the ship, accompanied by faint, disturbing sounds resembling countless damned souls screaming in Yudu. Qin Mu composed himself and transformed into a creature with a snake body, a scroll in his hand, and the gate of heaven influence appearing behind him. He slithered upward with his snake tail, avoiding the god statue and heading toward the ship. The 2 white bats were shocked by his repeated transformations, noting that he had first been a cow, then a human, and now a snake. Fu Yuchen became curious about the strange gate and wanted to open the gate of heaven influence to investigate. But Qin Mu warned him that behind the gate was the Yudu world and that opening it would mean allowing his soul to enter Yudu. Qin Mu then suddenly froze as he realized the truth about the gate. The gate sealed by the beehive seals was actually a gate of heaven influence. If that was the case, then the enormous sculpture was also connected to him. Qin Mu turned back and examined it carefully, realizing that the so-called sculpture was not a sculpture at all. It was an ancient existence who had perfectly cultivated the form of Saturn Sovereign. Just like Qin Mu, although Saturn Sovereign had a human head and snake body, not everyone could cultivate the gate of heaven influence and the scroll in hand. Even the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, known as the saint who appeared once every 500 years, had failed to cultivate this perfect form. Qin Mu had once believed that this perfect form represented the Overlord body and was one reason he was confident that the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could never surpass him. Now he had discovered another existence who had successfully cultivated the gate of heaven influence. Qin Mu wondered whether this was an ancient Overlord body, why he had been petrified, and how he had fallen into such a state. The figure before him was a god in Saturn Sovereign's form who had been petrified. With half of his body buried underground, his gate of heaven influence had become the passage connecting Yudu and the real world. But for unknown reasons, it had lost control. Yudu life forms had consequently poured into the real world and caused havoc, forcing the ancient gods to seal the gate. Qin Mu wondered who had petrified this ancient Overlord body and why the gate of heaven influence had not disappeared after his death but instead become a passage between Yudu and reality. He also questioned what the white bats meant when they said that the ancient gods had opened a gate between Yudu and the real world, and whether they knew what had happened in that distant era. Qin Mu suppressed these thoughts because he was still too weak to uncover the secrets left behind from before the Great Ruins disaster. He then turned toward the ship and carefully approached it from outer space. As he drew closer, the ship appeared increasingly enormous. It was much larger than the flying ships of the Eternal Peace Empire, although it was still insignificant compared with the Sun ship and Moon ship. The ship clearly did not belong to the mortal world and was covered in strange runes. Many had been destroyed, but some still occasionally flashed with vitality, changing shape whenever they appeared and disappeared. Qin Mu believed that careful observation might allow him to discover their mysteries. But he had no time to study them. He secretly boarded the stern and found that many parts of the ship had already been destroyed, although its main body remained intact. The ancient gods' beehive seals did not attack Qin Mu or the white bats, indicating that they were specifically designed to suppress Yudu life forms and posed no threat to beings from the real world. Qin Mu landed on the deck, followed by the dragon Qilin and the two white bats. The deck was covered in glowing green liquid. Qin Mu accidentally entered one of the puddles and immediately moved away after noticing silk-like substances being pulled from the sticky liquid. Fu Yuchu grabbed some of it, smelled it, and concluded that it was probably the remains of insects that had been killed. The dragon Qilin released balls of true fire to burn away the liquid. But suddenly a mass of devil chi surged from the bow and instantly extinguished his flames. Fu Yuchu and Fu Yuchen hurried in front of Qin Mu and released silent screeches from their mouths to clash with the devil chi. A tremendous force swept over them, blasting the two white bats away and lifting Qin Mu and the dragon Qilin into the air. After landing, they looked forward anxiously as darkness began flooding toward them as though it possessed its own consciousness. The dragon Qilin roared and expanded, revealing his true form as a gigantic half-dragon, half-Qilin creature. Flames and lightning erupted from his body as he charged them into the depths of the ship. His attack was powerful enough that even celestial being realm experts would normally have to avoid it. Yet the flames and lightning disappeared into the darkness without producing the slightest ripple. The two white bats then released all the fine white hair from their bodies like countless needles and fired it into the darkness. When they tried to recall their hair, none of it returned, leaving them standing bald and trembling like enormous rats. The darkness continued advancing slowly, accompanied by gentle laughter and incomprehensible words. The voice was neither that of a god nor a devil, and it was certainly not a Buddhist chant. Qin Mu's expression suddenly changed, and he spoke the only Yudu words he knew. The darkness immediately stopped advancing and rapidly retreated. The countless strands of white hair returned to the bodies of the two white bats. making them resemble hedgehogs again. And they hurriedly shook themselves so that the hair could return through their pores. Pongo So and several great shamans and shaman kings finally reached the entrance of the abyss. While the hundreds of divine arts practitioners from the barbarian D Empire had been reduced to fewer than 100 after most of them died in the strange and unpredictable Ghost Valley. Although Roland's Golden Palace had sent many great shamans to explore this place in the past, this large-scale expedition still caused enormous casualties. Pongo So did not care how many people died as long as he survived, treating the soldiers, great shamans, and even shaman kings as expendable sacrifices whose corpses could pave his way toward the center of Ghost Valley. Having lived for 10,000 years, he cared only about himself. Standing beside the abyss, Pongo So was fascinated because Ghost Valley had first attracted his attention 16 years earlier, after a flying ship from outer space crashed there. Roland's Golden Palace, the Heavenly Devil Cult, and the Great Thunderclap Monastery had all become interested in the place. But the Heavenly Devil Cult lacked a cult master, while the Great Thunderclap Monastery knew certain secrets and did not investigate. At that time, Pongo So was already approaching old age and valued his life too much to enter personally. So he remained hidden in Roland's Golden Palace while waiting for his sacred child of reincarnation. However, a broken sword brought back by a shaman king convinced him that the outer spaceship was extraordinary. After successfully reincarnating, he came to Ghost Valley, taking advantage of Khan Ruandi's preparations to mobilize an army against the Eternal Peace Empire and borrowing that military force to enter the valley. Pongo So told Gongmu and the others that Ghost Valley was filled with the power of shattered souls that had produced strange life forms, making it an ideal sacred ground for great shamans. The great shamans and shaman kings could feel their souls, spirits, and primordial spirits becoming excited, while the spirit and soul energy here surpassed even that of Roland's Golden Palace. The strange life forms that were nightmares to the barbarian D soldiers were valuable supplements to the great shamans, whose original cultivation method involved using the souls and spirits of living beings. Shaman King Gongmu greedily inhaled the energy from the abyss and realized that if Roland's Golden Palace established itself here, the cultivation of its great shamans could advance twice as quickly, while the spirit and soul energy could also strengthen their primordial spirits. Since Roland's Golden Palace possessed profound attainments in souls, spirits, and primordial spirits, taking control of this place could allow it to develop beyond anything previously imagined and potentially rise above the sacred grounds of Middle-earth. However, Pongo So cared more about the flying ship from outer space than the cultivation resources. His true goal was to break through the limits of humanity and become a god. And he believed the mysterious ship contained what he sought. He then jumped into the abyss, followed by the great shamans, shaman kings, and remaining soldiers, who protected him along the way. Pongo So had lived for 10,000 years and knew many secrets through his own experiences. He had once been among the higher-ups of the Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao sect, had visited Little Jade Capital, and had seen the secrets preserved there. He believed the ship had come from a mysterious place that might be the only place in the world where people could still become gods. And he resolved to obtain the ship and travel there. While descending, the group was attacked by many strange life forms from the abyss. Numerous soldiers, great shamans, and shaman kings used all their strength to protect Pongo So, sacrificing more than a dozen people before they finally reached the bottom. Meanwhile, on the treasure ship, Qin Mu watched the Devil Chi retreat and remained cautious. He knew a terrifying entity had been hidden within the Devil Chi, one whose strength surpassed that of the two white bats, yet it had withdrawn merely because of a single phrase in the Yudu language. After the Devil Chi disappeared, the miserable screams and strange life forms emerging from the Yudu world also vanished, leaving the ship unnaturally silent. Qin Mu believed that the entity responsible for exhausting the two eminent monks to death must be somewhere on the ship. He therefore brought Fu Yuchen, Fu Yuchu, and the dragon Qilin into the ship to investigate, intending to retreat immediately if they encountered danger. Moving along the left side of the treasure ship, they reached the center, where densely packed beehive seals continued to block most of the Devil Chi. Suddenly, a structure beside them creaked and a door opened, revealing a faint light. The two white bats moved aside and looked inside, finding a 20-yard-wide room decorated with jade tables, screens, burning candlesticks, and a bronze crane censer emitting smoke. Although nobody was present, the object suggested that someone had been there moments earlier. Fu Yuchen confirmed that the room was safe, and Qin Mu inspected it with his green heaven's eyes and cinnabar heaven's eyes without finding anything abnormal. The group entered, and Fu Yuchu found it strange that the door had opened because the doors on the ship had never opened before. Even when the two white bats had used all their strength, the room contained little besides a screen depicting green mountains, blue waters, a river, a small boat, and an old man fishing. Qin Mu sensed that someone was watching them but could not locate the source. He formed a mirror from his vital qi and discovered that the fishing old man in the painting had secretly turned his head to examine them. Qin Mu immediately attacked the screen, causing the old man to flee from the painting, abandon his fishing rod, run across the wall, and disappear through a door. Qin Mu chased him, but when he opened the door, it slammed shut behind him. He prepared his carefree sword in the wave sword form and called for the others, only to discover that the room behind him had transformed into a woman's embroidery room and the original room had completely disappeared. The two white bats and dragon Qilin hurriedly searched for Qin Mu but found nothing. They soon realized that the rooms on the ship were strange. Every time they closed and reopened a door, the room behind it changed. Fu Yuchen feared that they would die once the toxicity in their bodies erupted. But the dragon Qilin reasoned that the number of rooms could not be infinite and that they could find a pattern if they discovered the previous room. Qin Mu reached the same conclusion, realizing that the ship must be using a method of overlapping space. As long as the number of rooms was limited, there had to be a pattern. In the embroidery room, Qin Mu found wall lamps, embroideries, a worktable with a dragon and phoenix handkerchief, and a writing table containing a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. The ink on the paper was still wet, and the unfinished writing indicated that its author had been interrupted by something urgent. Qin Mu admired the graceful calligraphy. At that moment, the fishing elder suddenly appeared within the writing, blinked at Qin Mu, then escaped when Qin Mu tried to smear him with the brush. The elder jumped onto the table, ran across the wall, and disappeared through another door, and Qin Mu chased him into the next room. This room was a study filled with ancient books. Qin Mu tried to open one but could not, until the fishing elder suddenly jumped from it and entered another book. Qin Mu pulled out that book and successfully opened it, discovering that it was a family register. The register began with the first generation, the founding emperor Qin, whose name was Yi and who was called the common lord of the world. Qin Mu was shocked to see that this founding emperor shared the surname Qin, the same as himself, and recognized him as the founding emperor from the sword of founding emperor Sea of Blood. The thick family register recorded the lives and marriages of generations of people surnamed Qin. Qin Mu searched through it for the fishing elder and, upon reaching the final page, found only one remaining entry, the 107th generation. Son of Hanzhen, Fengqing. The family register ended there.